everybody, Trevor here, and welcome to another Top 7 video. And for today's topic, we'll be looking at the worst of the worst Nickelodeon shows of all time. For this list, I'm only going to include Nicktoons. Why? Because most of the live action shows aren't really worth my attention to begin with. Not even the dreaded Dan Schneider shows, most of which I used to like when I was a kid. I swear, if you watch the YouTube videos about them, or even the Quiet on Set miniseries, then you'll know why Dan Schneider is a controversial figure. And a creep. And another reason why I'm making this a top 7 is because, like my top 7 worst childhood films video that I've made a while back, the quantity of 7 represents the 7 deadly sins, which I won't go deep into, by the way. Oh, and one more thing. I won't be including continuations of any cartoon, whether it be SpongeBob, SquarePants, or Fairly OddParents, because I mainly want to focus on original ideas from the company. Now, without wasting any more time, let's get this crap over with because I'm very sick and tired of Nickelodeon these days. Coming at number 7 is Planet Sheen. When it comes to spin-offs of certain shows, this has got to be one of the absolute worst ones ever made by Nickelodeon. Planet Sheen is a spin-off show starring Sheen, the comic relief character from Jimmy Neutron, steals Jimmy's rocket, for some reason, flies deep into outer space, and eventually crash lands on an alien planet. And he stays there for God knows how long. This show is cartoon's level of bad and mediocrity. For starters, having a comic relief character in the main spotlight is usually not a good idea, because it makes them seem foolish and idiotic. The only good exception that I could think of is Timon and Pumbaa, which I consider one of my favorites from Disney Channel. However, the reason Planet Sheen is number 7 is, 1, it had some good potential to be a good spin-off, if it had better writing and direction, that is. And 2, compared to everything else on this list, it's so bad it's good in terms of obnoxious humor and bizarre moments. It's like Tentacolino levels of bad and insanity, which makes this cartoon an easier target to make fun of. But other than those two things, it's still a pretty bad cartoon with annoying characters, especially Sheen, obnoxious toilet humor, bad writing, cheap and lazy CGI animation compared to its decent predecessor, and the overall premise makes no flippin' sense. I mean, wouldn't Sheen miss his old friends back on Earth? Heck, I'm pretty sure they're missing the crap out of him too, and this is why I would recommend the original Jimmy Neutron in terms of better writing, characters, and animation quality. And before we go to number 6, I just wanted to point out that John A. Davis, one of the show's creators, regretted working on this, which explains why the show only lasted for one season and 26 episodes, and with a low score on IMDb. Number 6. Bunsen is a Beast. This is a cartoon animated by Butch Hartman, you know, the same guy who brought us the Fairly OddParents, Danny Phantom, and Tough Puppy. When I first watched a preview or teaser of this on the internet, I had no idea it was made by Butch Hartman, judging by the new animation style. The reason this show sucked is because it's so bland and generic compared to Butch Hartman's previous works like Danny Phantom. I mean, the characters are so forgettable, the plots are boring, the animation sucks, and when they try to tell a joke, it usually falls flat. It's like they're not even trying to be funny anymore. And considering Butch Hartman's failed attempt at a streaming service like Oaxis, and for being a con artist who couldn't handle criticism, I'm not going to support him anymore. Hence why I'm putting this cartoon on the number 6 spot on this list. However, if you want to see a newer and better Butch Hartman cartoon, I suggest you watch Fairly OddParents: A New Wish. While I haven't seen that show yet, I've heard great things about it from reviewers online. I might give it a chance one day because it looks gold compared to season 10 of the original show. Number 5. Sanjay and Craig. When I first saw promo art for this cartoon, my initial thoughts were, maybe it won't be so bad after all. I mean, it has a cool looking snake in it. By the way, I used to be fascinated by snakes when I was a schoolboy. But after giving this cartoon an honest chance, my hopes went all the way down due to the show's obnoxious toilet humor, uninteresting characters, especially the snake Craig, bad writing, and not to mention, the animation style looks like it completely rips off Bob's Burgers. I smell a lawsuit coming! Actually, the funny thing is, from what I've researched, these two shows were made by the same character designer, which is quite interesting if you ask me. But still, that doesn't excuse Sanjay and Craig for being one of the worst cartoons on Nickelodeon for having unfunny humor including fart jokes and other uncomfortable forms of toilet humor. A perfect example of a very bad episode would be Fart Baby, which the mysterious Mr. Ender reviewed a long time ago. And I do have to agree with him regarding this show because I'm actually sick and tired of shows reusing fart jokes over and over and over again. But the most uncomfortable thing about this episode is that the writers were treating Sanjay's stuck fart as a form of pregnancy. And when he finally farted it out, here's the result. In the end, Craig tells Sanjay to let go of the fart bubble, in which it flew away into Newman's face and exploded. Lovely. After watching this episode, I'm not going to watch any more Sanjay and Craig episodes ever again. Even though I think snakes in general are cool, but boy oh boy is this cartoon so unfunny. I suggest you watch Bob's Burgers instead of this. Number 4. Fanboy and Chum. Honestly, when I first watched the commercials for this show, I knew this one would be terrible. Here's a fun little history lesson. Back in the 2000s, there were 2 shows that were about to be greenlit and bought out by a channel. One is Adventure Time, the other is this monstrosity, the latter of which ended up on Nickelodeon. And to be quite honest, I'm actually glad Adventure Time ended up on Cartoon Network instead because I'm afraid if Nickelodeon bought it out, then chances are they would make things worse with it. And at least Adventure Time had a following with interesting characters, funny humor, world building, and writing. But for Fanboy and Chum, man, these 2 are so freaking annoying. And not only that, but the character designs in this show are eyesores to look at. Heck, they even mostly rely on unfunny humor including fart jokes, sniffles, and other forms of gross out humor. However, if there's one character I do like in this show, it would be Whizboy, who is basically Squidward of this cartoon, but that doesn't excuse everything else. Oh, and don't get me started on the overly annoying theme song. Overall, Fanboy and Chum is one of the most annoying animated atrocities I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm glad I wasn't a fan of it to begin with. I know Nickelodeon is notorious for its gross out humor for kids, but they need to do better than this. Number 3. Pig Goat Banana Cricket. Wow, the animation in this looks like garbage. And I do mean literal garbage. Look how grotesque the characters look. It makes me want to throw up. Also, the characters are freaking forgettable. My least favorite of them all is the pig, whose catchphrase is, "That's my favorite!" to everything that he sees. And in addition to that, like the other Nickelodeon atrocities, this one also relies on obnoxious toilet humor. Not to mention that the ugly animation and character designs in this make me want to puke, as I said before. And those are the reasons why Pig Goat Banana Cricket deserves a number 3 spot. It seems like it was trying to be the next Ren and Stimpy, except that show had a little more effort into the gross out humor and characters, even though I hate its creator in real life, but I won't get into that. Coming at number 2 is Breadwinners. This show is about 2 ducks who deliver bread while driving a flying van all around the place. Oh, and they also mine for bread too. How could I forget that? One problem I have with this show is that the 2 duck characters, Badoose and Sway Sway, barely look like birds. They look more like frogs to me. And another problem with Breadwinners is not only the butt jokes and other forms of toilet humor, but like Felix the Cat the movie, it never shuts up! There's constant noise throughout the show. It doesn't even know when to take a break. At least with Hotel Transylvania, while it does have wacky, fast-paced animation, but it knows when to take a rest, and it had quiet moments. Breadwinners, on the other hand, was doing the exact opposite. And what's even stranger is that the original Breadwinners pilot was originally an independent one-off short film when the creators themselves were contacted by the Nickelodeon executives asking them if they could greenlight this as a show. The creators, Steve Borst and Gary Doodles, thought it was just a spam or a joke from Nickelodeon, but it turned out that they were being legit, which led them to make a full series of Breadwinners. These are the biggest reasons why Breadwinners deserves the number 2 spot. It's worse than Fanboy and Chum, and it's also worse than Pig Goat Banana Cricket. If you're like me who couldn't stand cartoon noise and gross out humor these days, I suggest you stay away from Breadwinners at all costs. Breadwinners? More like bread losers. Before we get to our number one pick, I just want to give a bunch of dishonorable mentions. The SpongeBob spin-off shows like Camp Coral and The Patrick Star Show. Let's just say that they're not really worth my attention due to the fact that the late Steven Hillenburg didn't want SpongeBob spin-offs to begin with, so that's why they're dishonorable mentions here. Mr. Meaty. I decided to make this one a dishonorable mention because it's not really a cartoon. It does have a few funny moments once in a while, and at least it was trying to be original, but that doesn't excuse the very ugly puppet designs. Just stick with the original Muppets. They're far more appealing to look at than these monsters. The CGI Rugrats reboot. It's alright, but not as memorable as its original predecessor, and it's also not as good as its original spin-off All Grown Up. Rocket Power. I actually kind of like this show for its sporting activities and cool stunts, though I can understand why some people don't like it, mainly because it's just as dated as Quack Pack from Disney Channel. But still, it's not the worst in my eyes. But Ugly Martians. It seriously would have been number 5 because I haven't seen that show in a very long time, though I've heard it wasn't very good to begin with. That's why I would stick to Jimmy Neutron instead. And my number one least favorite Nickelodeon show of all time is The Adventures of Kid Danger. If you thought Breadwinners was bad enough, then you haven't seen anything yet. Where do I start with this one? The Adventures of Kid Danger is a cheap cartoon spin-off show of the original live-action comedy Henry Danger, which was just as bad as this one. First of all, the Flash animation has got to be some of the worst I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, it looks so cheap and lazy! And just like the other candidates on this list, it relies on unfunny jokes including toilet humor, and very annoying and unlikable characters, especially Captain Man himself, which in my opinion is a very stupid name! But the biggest reason why this is number 1 is not only is it cheaper and lazier compared to the other candidates on this list, but it was created and directed by Dan Schneider himself. Once again, I don't want to go into full detail on this guy for obvious reasons, and I don't want to make my audience uncomfortable. So I'll provide a few links in the description below if you want more information on why this guy sucks and why he's a scumbag. Oh, and if he's watching this, seek mental help immediately! One perfect example of a terrible episode is the quote-unquote first episode, where Henry Danger and Captain Man fight off against a giant popcorn monster. And what's even worse is that we barely get a proper introduction to these main characters, unless maybe if you watch the original live-action Henry Danger, then I guess I can understand, but to be honest, I was never into Henry Danger to begin with for obvious reasons. If you want more information on why this show sucks, I'll provide a link or two in the description below. Trust me, this cartoon is not worth your attention. If you want to watch a better cartoon show or movie about superheroes with toilet humor, then I suggest you watch Captain Underpants and Dogman, since those have likable and relatable characters with better writing, direction, and humor. Believe me, they're much better than The Adventures of Kid Danger or anything that Nickelodeon has pooped out these days. Now let me know in the comment section below on which Nickelodeon shows you consider the worst. Do you agree with my list, or do you have your own personal preference? And if you legitimately like any of these shows on this list, then that's fine. Just don't defend Dan Schneider or any of the other bad people at Nickelodeon for their horrible actions. Otherwise you'll come off as a foolish and blind fantard. And like the Walt Disney Company, here's hoping that the Nickelodeon studio will earn their reputation back, which I doubt nowadays since I don't really support them anymore for these reasons alone, aside from their good shows like SpongeBob and Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is Trevor Davis signing off, and I'll see you all again in my next top video.